Welcome to the More Tea Vicar podcast from B&H Church in Bristol with myself, James Stevenson, and you.
Wayne Massey.
Today we're going to be talking about AI, automation, and human flourishing. Wayne.
Oh, I'm getting so old now. I spent so over the last 4 or 5 days, I've had to try and phone a doctor. If you're a medic and listening to this, I do apologise.
Yeah.
And I've also had to try and we've also had to try and make some phone calls around higher level education.
And I've spent the last 2 weeks tracking a parcel on its way to Australia.
Yeah.
With
So
a company that, depending on my levels of emotion engagement in this podcast, will or will not remain nameless.
Yeah, I nearly said it. If you just go back 30 seconds, you'll hear the first letter of the company's name. Basically, James is not a fan of insert name of courier company.
Excellent. So we're talking about AI and automation and humanity and what it means for us to flourish in this age. We're aware that as you listen or watch, there'll be people engaged in systems around AI. There'll be people who are experiencing it on a day-to-day basis, and we want to think about what that means and what it means for us as Christians to live in a world where whole sections of our lives are being handed over to pre-programmed approaches to life.
So it's about. So there was once upon a time where I'm going to sound like my grandfather here, my grandmother, but like my dad's bank manager was the captain of the Irish rugby team. But you could be sitting you could be sitting in a waiting room and like the guy would walk through. He was huge. Yeah. And he'd sort of see, my dad and he'd go, "Oh, I'm not talking to him," and he'd walk on. There were these days where your bank manager knew who you were, especially if you were like running your own business.
Very removed from the present day experience.
I remember I have a chronic illness, and I remember having a flare up, and I was driving around, literally just driving onto the doctor's, who's basically the surgery was the side of his house, and ringing the doorbell, and then his wife leaning out the window going, "He's in bed with a bad back." He says, "What's the problem?" And then she going, and him writing a prescription from his bed,
In case you're worried that this is a podcast of two grumpy middle-aged men complaining, the BBC has put out 2 articles in the last week, one of which is on I think it's on Kenyans writing essays for students in the UK, and the other just came yesterday, was about the shift that I think is happening this week around booking systems for primary care with GPs, to avoid the 8 a.m. rush of people calling their surgery for the appointments that are available that day. And there's some anxiety about how that's going to be rolled out. And so we're aware that AI is not just something that is happening to a minority, it's coming into the majority of people's experience of life. And so we want to think a little bit about what it means and how we engage with it.
So, and the thing behind the thing is the role of technology and what it does to our humanity. And actually, excuse me, I'll back off. That was a conversation that happened in the Reformation when they invented the printing press.
Yeah.
So it's not a new conversation, but every time technology takes leaps forward, there's always this conversation about what does this do to us as human beings.
Yes.
And we're going to explore some of the lies, because one of the lies we always tell ourselves is going to make our lives better. So Peter Drucker, who's one of my favorite thinkers in business and in leadership and in management, wrote in the 1960s that the computer would make the life of the manager so much simpler, and that actually, and there was a whole thinking then that we'd all be working 3-day weeks because technology would be an aid, and we're not. Yeah. So the thing behind the thing is actually, what does technology do to us? Yeah.
And so, as is often the case when we come to a big kind of ethical issue around creation and what it means for us to interact with it, one of the early places we're going to go is Genesis.
Yep.
Because Genesis is a place that St. Augustine, friend of the podcast, never really left. He wrote 40 commentaries on the book. So it's not surprising that we're not going to leave Genesis when it comes to an understanding of humanity and how humanity functions at its best and its worst with the world.
So begins Genesis 1 and chapter 2. In chapters 1 and chapter 2, we get the story of the creation of humanity. And the concept of the creation of humanity is that we are the crown of creation. And that we are made in the image of God in a way that the rest of creation isn't. We have life breathed into us by God, and that actually is a different order of life to the rest of creation. And we are blessed by God to be fruitful, to multiply, and to subdue the earth. So there is something about in this creation story that all of us together are made in his image. We have a different order of life,
Yeah.
Which to everything else in the created order, and that life is it's integrated and it's whole. So in the Hebrew world, who you were was your physicality, your spirituality, so basically body and soul.
Yeah.
And this idea that you're not a disembodied being, but actually there's something about your physicality that matters and your spirituality that matters, and you don't separate one from the other.
And if you read Genesis carefully, essentially Genesis 1 to 11 is like the story of how everything has gone wrong that we live in today. So individual sin, corporate sin, and the kind of the spiritual impact of evil on the face of the earth. And those stories tell us more about ourselves than we'll ever tell about them, and they describe a state of creation that is inescapable. So we cannot kind of this side of eternity create a perfect heavenly space. So even in the saved, redeemed church, sin still exists. So no matter how much we might try to kind of retreat into the woods, as some Christians did, in order to kind of create a heavenly citizenship, we're still not going to be able to exit the state of humanity after the fall. It is inescapable. There will be better and worse experiences. There will be more light and more darkness in different places. We can see that in our cities and in our countries and across the world. But the state of sin is inescapable. And so what that means is that when we get to Genesis 12, we begin to see God interacting with his creation, bringing that redemption, bringing light into the world of darkness. And so when we come to think about AI and automation, we've got to look at it through that lens and see that actually when AI is used for an attempt to create a better space that is outside of God, then the way God will look at that is he will say, well, like every other attempt to create a life that is better outside of him, it is destined to fail. But when Christians engage with creation and can use it for good, then it can participate in the way of the kingdom of God breaking into this earth.
Where are we going next?
Let's talk about how that actually works. So the incarnation and the importance of the presence of God. So we're Christians. We're engaging with the difficulty of this broken world. What does it mean for us as Christians to engage well with AI?
So the thing we're saying behind all of this is that there is a danger this tool removes us from being physically and really present with one another.
Yes.
And yet, as Christians, we believe that the most singular, history-defining, earth-remaking event in the whole of the scope of creation is when God physically comes and makes himself physically present with us as one of us.
Yes.
And so therefore anything that we develop, anything that we create that removes the potential for us to be physically present, it is kind of thrown into a kind of a challenge by the incarnation. John chapter 1, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Greek is literally God moved into the neighborhood. That's how Peterson translates it. I heard somebody else talking about it. It's basically saying like he walked in, he sat on the sofa next to you, said, "Shove up, can I have a go at the remote control?"
Yeah.
It's like that present. He tabernacled amongst us, and which is an Exodus image. And so this idea that our physicality matters so much that in order to redeem it, he makes himself one of us. And that's got to therefore have an impact upon how we think about our physicality and how we engage with one another physically.
Talk to me about Gnosticism.
So the Gnostics, so the Greeks, around the time of the New Testament, the world they're working in is a Greek world, and Gnosticism was a big thing in the Greek world. This idea that the physical was something to escape. So where we've started by saying, actually, the Hebrew worldview was that your physical and your spiritual were joined together.
Yeah.
The Greek worldview was that actually physicality was not a good thing, and should be escaped, and that your soul could escape to be on a higher plane. And the Gnostics believed they had some secret truth that enabled you to discover this, so that you could, you could leave the physicality behind. And what it meant was that physicality didn't matter. Lots of writers talk about how our modern world is actually quite dangerously Gnostic. So this idea that whether it be over-the-top makeup or whether it be and actually some of the trans ideology sits behind this.
Definitely.
Whether it be over-the-top makeup, whether it be that, whether it be plastic surgery, that actually your body is a vessel for you, and so therefore you can shape and use it and do what you like with it, because ultimately it's not really you. And that's pushing. Lots of people go, oh, really? Is that what we think? But actually, lots of kind of thinkers have said that's where this world is. And so this idea that I look inside to find myself, and then I recreate myself physically, and that actually what I see physically may not be who I think I really am, is quite a Gnostic thought. The body is just a shell to be used.
And therefore it devalues the power of relationship.
Yeah.
So if you think about that through a kind of postmodern mindset, you go, okay, well, that's what it means for me as an individual. That's what it means for other people as individuals. But actually, a Gnostic approach to life in the context of and so the denial of reality, which is a kind of a subplot within within AI, it denies the reality of the relationship between the two of us, between humans interrelating. So part of the fall is that enmity comes between the two, between Adam and Eve. It comes in between humanity, and part of the redeeming work of Jesus is not our individual salvation and being reconciled to God. It is the reconciling of all things. It is the coming together of humanity, and the Spirit of God enabling us to love one another as image bearers, but also as people who are being redeemed by Jesus. So when AI brings division and enemying between people because there is a separating and a distancing, we can look at it and go, oh, that is not of the kingdom of God. That is not part of God's good creation, that there is a distancing that comes between us, because all things Jesus should lead us to being closer to one another.
And the thing that taught us that physical matters was COVID. So I came off my bicycle in COVID and did some damage to my face. Ended up in one of the hospitals in Bristol having an X-ray, and I came in and everybody were all masked up, and they stood kind of away from me, and they said, "Can you put your face here, 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 and here?" And they tried to X-ray my cheekbone, and she said it's not quite working. Then she came up to me and she said, the radiographer, and said, "Do you mind?" I was asked for permission. "Do you mind if I put my hands on your face and just move your head around a bit so I get the right angle?" And I said, "No, it's fine." And then she did it. And I was suddenly aware that was the first person outside of a member of my immediate family who'd physically touched me for about 6 months. And loads of people, especially single people, talked about how they missed physical contact in COVID. And then there's a film from when you and I were young with Sylvester Stallone called Demolition Man. And I think it's called Demolition Man. And basically, he's a cop from the 90s who's frozen and then gets unfrozen in it's probably about 2025 in the future. And he falls in love with Sandra Bullock in the future. And she basically says, "Would you like to have sex with me?" And he goes, "Yeah, okay." And he's thinking 1990s style sex. And they have to put on these VR headsets and sit opposite each other in this room and, basically think about the other person. And he just goes, "This isn't working." And the whole point is that the future has discovered this way of doing something that is a very physical act and thinking it works. And then it takes somebody from the past to go, "This is nonsense." And that's Gnosticism. We don't actually need our physicality isn't required, and the other isn't required.
So our experiences in the last couple of weeks of automation has been has been a kind of a distancing from people that we have formed a relationship with. So in my case, I've purchased the passing of a package from England to Australia. In your instance, you're dealing with
Various institutions.
And the kind of the shielding experience that we get of don't come anywhere near us because we don't have the answers to this, that emerge out of. And I found myself in my kitchen trying to have a conversation with an AI receptionist after closing hours because I wasn't getting. I was so cross about this situation. I was like, "Can you answer me this? Can you answer me this?" And there's that kind of sense of actually there's distance here. We're not taking you seriously. Because we're just providing an algorithm of answers that doesn't actually allow the problem to be addressed.
And I think just one of the things, one of the dangers, I think, so this is where I think actually it's really worth us being grumpy middle-aged men, because actually in talking to my children's generation, I will say, well, let's pick up the phone and call somebody, and there is this, oh no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
There is this understanding that you shouldn't pick up the phone and call somebody, that you should send an email.
Yeah.
And I think the email's going to disappear into the ether, and that might be a challenge to my mindset that it might not disappear into the ether. But this younger generation thing that actually it's not normal to pick up a phone and to talk to somebody real, is actually quite dangerous because sometimes in order to get things done, and in order to really engage, you need to be physically
I was promised 3 phone calls by this company, and on each occasion I got an email after the promise of the phone call, and then a subsequent email saying this matter is closed.
Oh well, no,
and you think, hang on.
I made a complaint with Budget Car Hire. I've just named you, Budget Car Hire, and we got an email back going, "Thank you for your complaint. Please do not email us again. We'll get back to you." So then after 4 weeks, I emailed again and went, "Hi," and then I got an email back going, "Thank you very much. We'll get back to you." And it's like, and there's no phone number.
So what I think we need.
Are you young enough to remember Victor Meldrew?
Yeah. Let's not take our listeners there. I think one of the things we got to listen to in this is what it means for us to be countercultural as Christians. What it means for us to be church, and how do we provide a counter narrative in this world. And a compelling way to do that is for us to be close to one another. Close as Jesus was and is close to us, but in a way that doesn't bring fear. So that ultimately, there's a fear that that I might be right, that you might be right, or that the customer might be right. Very different to how customer services was 20, 30 years ago, where it was always trained that the customer is always right. That actually there's a fear that you might be right and you might have a legitimate complaint against us, so we're going to keep you at arm's length from us, or a fear that you might bring a complaint that we can't handle it. But ultimately, fear is what separates us, and we know that there's no fear in love. So if there is love in Jesus, and if we can bring love into this world, then it means that actually we can draw close to people, and we can draw close to people in a way that isn't fearful of what they want to bring to us.
So the Church of Jesus Christ is the antidote to this way of being, in that the church is the physical embodiment of a people, a family. It's the temple. The church, Paul says, is the living stones of where Jesus dwells, and that actually, if you want to encounter the living God, the best place to encounter him is in a community of believers living their lives out together and related to one another. So I think, got to big up B&A. I think the most kind of countercultural thing that we do quite a lot, but is our soul food meal on a Wednesday, which is a meal for anybody. And quite often, a lot of these kind of community meals, people come and are served from behind a counter, or they come and they do takeaway type stuff. I'm not knocking that, but what soul food is, and we learnt this from a church in Edinburgh, is beautifully brilliant. Is it lays a lovely table where everybody comes and eats, and people from the church and people who walk in, and real lives and real friendships are formed, and people are affirmed in who they are and in the physicality of who they are, and they are loved for who they are, and they are given space to be known and to be loved and to be physically present, and therefore emotionally and spiritually present. And I think that is the gift that the church has, especially some of the people who come to Soul Food are some of the people who most of most of us just walk by.
Yeah.
And yet suddenly here they are, and they're given dignity and honor, which is back to Genesis 1, made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And part of giving them dignity and honor is being with them physically, hearing their stories, answering their questions, asking them questions.
Yeah.
And that's what the church brings. So we all had this whole thing that online church was going to take down church after COVID, and it does. I was in bed ill last Sunday, and I watched B&A online, and it was all right, but it wasn't brilliant, to be quite honest with you. But what made it bearable for me was actually everybody, the people who stood up to lead. You, Amy, and Wendy, Denise, who spoke, Slayman and Izzy, who did an interview. I know them all.
Yeah.
And so these were people. I wasn't watching from afar. I was watching because I couldn't be there. So actually, it was a gift to me because I couldn't be there.
Yeah.
But actually, it wasn't the same as being in the room.
So I want to confess that there's a we need to bring out a distinction here between being saved and being a follower of Jesus and growing into maturity in Him. We're going to talk about this on Sunday morning. I'm going to talk about it in Philippians. As we grow into maturity in Him, we become more aware of the insecurities and the sin inside us. And I can confess that in the last couple of years, as God has been doing that in me, I can see that there have been periods of my life where I have actually performed more like an AI complaint system when people have brought things to me, where I've actually just found ways to not listen to what other people have brought to me. I've come to realize how significant that was, and also at times probably how dangerous that was. And I know that the only antidote to that is to be secure in who I am in God. And out of that identity as a child of God, I'm able to then see in His grace the truth of where I've not been willing to hear what other people have been able to, been wanting to bring to me. And so I think in all of this, we can kind of look at the systems and go, well, this is a really frustrating impact of AI, that there's this distancing. But actually, we can kind of point out there rather than go, actually, in my own heart, am I willing to let other people come close to me and say the things that perhaps I'm less keen to hear? And have I developed my own systems to keep people at a distance who would say things that actually are for my good? And the only way we can fix that is actually by bringing ourselves before God. And ultimately, AI cannot be brought before God to deal with its own heart issues, but we can, and we can ask Him to do a renewing work in us that means that we don't keep people at arm's length.
So summary, in a culture that, like all other cultures before, is doing all it can to create technology that keeps others at bay.
Yeah.
Those of us who are in Jesus and who form the new community of the church and are longing for a new creation where we will be with Him and with one another perfectly, are called not to keep others at bay, but to draw one another in and to be present physically, emotionally, and spiritually with one another. And in doing so, we reveal how God is for and with us.